Welcome to On The Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsom, and we're back after the 1 week break to break down UFC Paris, which goes down this weekend. It's a phenomenal card, top to bottom. The Paris crowd are always super electric, super engaging, involved. It's just going to be a fun fight night. You can just almost guarantee it every single year. The UFC come to Paris around this time of the year and it just absolutely works. Of course, we've got another early start time as well. Not quite as early as the Shanghai card on the last UFC event, but you know, this is going to be a afternoon card or maybe a late afternoon card in Europe. So definitely can't wait for this event. Like I say, the French cards are always super awesome to watch, super electric, great fights, early start time. What is not to love? But just before we get into those breakdowns, as always, if you are wanting to jump into the action this weekend, which I'm absolutely sure you are going to want to do, being that you're here listening to this podcast, make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. Whether you're a long-term gambler that loves to have the written breakdowns to understand why and where and how we're choosing the recommended bets that we are, then we've got that section for you. If you're somebody that is a fun gambler that just likes the long shot parlays or maybe some small parlays or a mixture of both, we've got a section for the fun gamblers where we've got pre-built parlays, or you can build your own parlays with our best bets option as well. And then we've got our official bet section, which if you don't want to do any research or put any time or any effort into the bets and you just want to tailor professional handicapper and what they're betting, then we've got that official bet section for you as well. And then also included with all of our betting subscriptions comes Base AI, our UFC prediction software. It's on an absolute heater this year. It's firing out some unbelievable underdogs as well lately. Over the last 2 or 3 months, we've had some very, very wide underdogs winning and winning decisively that Bayes called as well. So we don't separate Bayes AI from the handicapper section. Everything's all included. All you've got to do is choose whether you want to pay for one event, monthly or annually. And the good news is all of our subscriptions are super affordable, as our ethos is we want you to make the money back that you spend with us as quickly as you possibly can so you can start profiting on top of your bets. And that's the reason behind the nice prices, and that's all at MMAplay365.com. And with the introduction out the way, with the promo out of the way, let's get down to breaking some fights down. And of course, as always, we start in the main event. It's going to be a firecracker of a main event. We've got a French fighter in the headline fight as well. We've got Nassourdine Imavov versus Caio Borralho, and it's a really interesting fight because these two guys, you would imagine, and again, nothing's ever set in stone, but you would imagine that the winner of this fight is going to go on to fight for the title. Now, before a couple of weeks ago, that fight for the title would have been Dricus du Plessis, which I think Nassourdine Imavov versus du Plessis or Caio Borralho versus du Plessis is a super competitive fight. I'm not sure who I'd pick. I haven't researched or made any analysis on those fights, but yeah, all I'm saying is any of those fights super competitive. But the thing is now Khamzat Chimaev is the champion, and we all knew that he was elite and world class, but what he did to Dricus du Plessis, I think some people are looking at the wrong angle on that fight and saying, oh, well, du Plessis didn't do X, Y, and Z, and, it was a letdown performance from him. It really wasn't. Khamzat Chimaev is just that good, and it's going to be interesting to see what adjustments du Plessis makes, just on digressing there. But now we've got a fight here with Imavov and Borralho where they know that they'll get the title fight, but it's going to be against Khamzat Chimaev. Now stylistically, I think Borralho handles that fight against Chimaev much better than what Imavov would, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Borralho is going to beat Imavov. This is a stylistic fight in itself, and it's a good fight as well. 5 rounds, both fighters I think are absolutely fine over 5 rounds. They'll of course both slow, that's just natural, but I genuinely think that in a high-paced fight, both will look okay in round 5. It's not going to be where one of the gas tanks just completely empties and they can't function. But stylistically, it's interesting because you've got Imavov, who's predominantly a striker. You've got Borralho, who's predominantly a grappler. So even when you look at the other areas of the game, so Imavov can wrestle, good offensively and defensively. He's also a decent grappler. In regards to like being sort of on the mat, I wouldn't say he's so much dominant offensively, but if he's taken down, he can get back up. Or if he is fighting someone that's a lesser grappler than himself, he will dominate on the mat. I think that's probably fair to say. And then with Caio Borralho, like predominantly a grappler, like I've already said, but you know, the wrestling or the takedown game is okay. His striking's improved over the years as well. But the bottom line here, I kind of feel like if this is a 25-minute kickboxing fight, I think Imavov wins. If this is a 25-minute fight where, you know, there's plenty of groundwork going on, then that's going to be Borralho that wins. I think that's the binary outcome of this fight. But it's almost like who puts it together better offensively, and I think that's more Caio Borralho. But what I will give Imavov is he puts it well together defensively, and this is why it's going to be a super competitive fight, because Borralho isn't just going to close the distance, get a hold of Imavov, drag him down and just have his way with him for 25 minutes like Chimaev did with Duplessis. Like, I don't think it's going to be that level of domination, but I think Borralho is going to, like, if you said to me right now, look, is Borralho going to get moments on the mat, and plenty of moments on the mat in this fight? I think he does. I think he will get Imavov down. Maybe it's difficult early on in the fight, but the more Imavov is forced to defend takedowns and stand back up to his feet, which I think he'll do fine in the early moments of this fight. But if Borralho's forcing him to do that for the longevity of the fight, then naturally, I think Imavov's gas tank is just going to deplete quicker than Borralho's, because Borralho's in the world where he wants to be. And because of that, I think the longer the fight goes on, the more likely it is that Borralho's going to have success. In regards to the striking, yes, Imavov's the better striker, the more diverse striker, the more accurate striker, technical, more educated striker. But Borralho's got this rugged dog in him, and he has, to be fair to him, improved his striking as well, to the point where he can be competitive at this level, up in the division, like the high-level strikers. He can be relatively competitive with, enough to make sure he's not totally outclassed and that he can get in close and get his takedowns. And I think that's key. If Borralho was like a million miles off from Imavov striking, then it's going to be difficult for him to close the distance, get in and take him down. But I think Caio Borralho's striking is going to be okay enough, good enough, comfortable enough to be able to go shot for shot with Imavov in the smaller moments, to be able to close the distance, get a body lock and take him down. I genuinely think both fighters are going to have moments in this fight. I genuinely think that both fighters are going to have definite rounds. But when I'm looking at which one is the better mixed martial artist, which one's the more offensively better put together fighter, I just see it being Caio Borralho, and I'm gutted for him that it's Khamzat Chimaev that's the champion right now, because if you take Khamzat Chimaev out the equation, I think Caio Borralho's got a good chance of picking up a UFC belt, but against Chimaev it's just going to be rough. But look, that's not this fight here. This fight here is Borralho against Imavov, and I just think Caio Borralho is just better put together, and I think the bigger gap in skill in this fight is on the mat grappling, where Borralho can be dominant, where Borralho can blanket, take his back, control large portions of the fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Caio Borralho to win this fight. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, I kind of wish this was 5 rounds. And I know I said that on the last podcast, but when I recorded the last podcast, I didn't realise the fight was 5 rounds. It was stating 3 on Topology. But this one, again, is stating 3 rounds, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to be 5. But we've got Benoit Saint-Denis versus Mauricio Ruffy. And like I say, this, having the option of going 5 rounds would have been unbelievable. But yeah, look, it's a good fight, and again, it's another like kind of binary fight. If Benoit Saint-Denis stands and strikes with Ruffy for the full duration of the fight, then not only is he going to be in risk of getting knocked out, but I do think that Ruffy will outclass Saint-Denis from a striking perspective. However, if Saint-Denis gets in with his wrestling and grappling and makes it difficult for Ruffy, then I do think that Ruffy's got a level of defense with the wrestling and grappling. He's very physically imposing. He's strong, good hips. I'm not saying that Benoit Saint-Denis can't take him down, because I definitely think he can, and I definitely think he will. I just feel like it's a super close fight, because even when you go back to the striking, like, it's not as if Saint-Denis completely out of his depth striking. He's super aggressive. He'll come forwards. He'll try and land on you. And both fighters make a habit in fights where they're dominant of pressurizing opponents and putting opponents on the back foot. Like, Ruffy's a front runner. Benoit Saint-Denis is absolutely a front runner. And the thing is, when they can't be the front runner and their opponent's pushing back on them a little bit, then that's when you start seeing gaps and holes and where they can be got at. So it's super interesting because from that pressure and forward pressure perspective and how they like to dictate the pace and the range of fights, they're very, very similar. They're stylistically different, but they're very similar in regards to the pace, pressure, and, the distance management, which is no distance. Like I say, they love to overwhelm and get in their opponent's face. So it's going to be really interesting of who actually gets the upper hand there. And I kind of feel with the style differences, it's more likely to be Saint-Denis. And the reason I say that is because of the wrestling. Like, Ruffy can be aggressive, super aggressive, come forward, be in your face, land a load of strikes and look to knock you out. But if his opponent's got this massive wrestling threat, then how much is he going to be on that gas pedal of pushing forwards? Because if he overexerts or if he's over-aggressive and, makes a mistake, then he's actually closing the distance for Benoit Saint-Denis himself to be able to shoot that takedown and get him down. And yeah, I think because they're so similar, and they're so similar in regards to how opponents can get at them, I just feel that Benoit Saint-Denis is gonna thrive more with the pace. With the pace similarities and pressure similarities of both fighters because of the stylistic difference, if that makes sense. I just feel that Ruffy's going to come forwards, be super aggressive, and Benoit Saint-Denis is going to come forwards, be super aggressive. They'll crash in the middle of the cage. They'll crash the pocket, both of them. But that helps Saint-Denis because Ruffy wants to keep the fight standing. Realistically, what Ruffy should be doing here is being on the back foot, not letting Saint-Denis close the distance, get a hold of him, shoot takedowns, and work his striking from the outside. But that's just not his game. So again, stylistically, I just kind of feel like the fight favours Saint-Denis a little bit. Now, look, I'm not going to be shocked if Ruffy knocks Saint-Denis out, or if Saint-Denis wrestles hard for a round and a half, tires out, and then Ruffy takes over, finishes him late, or gets a decision. Like, it is going to be a super competitive fight. Let's not get it twisted. But I just feel like stylistically and how they both fight, it just favours Saint-Denis just that little bit more. And the fact that Saint-Denis is the underdog as well, that's the way I'm leaning. So for those reasons, I'm picking Benoit Saint-Denis to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Bolaji Oki versus Mason Jones. And I kind of feel, look, this is going to be a good fight as well. Like, both fighters are going to come forwards. They're going to look to bang. Mason Jones, we all know loves a war. Bolaji Oki's tough, athletic, durable. He's going to be in his opponent's face. He likes to overwhelm and put his foot on the gas pedal as well. But I do feel that there's a level difference here from a skill set perspective and a quality perspective. And I'm just getting that sense that Mason Jones is just a level above Bolaji Oki. Like, Oki's good and he's super serviceable, and I still think he's in a developmental stage in his career, and he'll be around in the UFC for a long time, I'm sure. But right now, Mason Jones is just a more complete fighter, the fighter that is banging his prime right now. Maybe there's still some development for Jones, but I just feel that he's operating around his prime and he's operating at a different level here. Like, when you look at the striking, I think Jones is going to be the better striker, better technical striker. I think he's going to be faster with his strikes as well. I also think from a volume and combination perspective, he's going to be hitting at a much higher clip. And then when you look at the wrestling side, I think Jones is at least defensively more than good enough if Oki does start shooting takedowns. But I also think Mason Jones' offensive wrestling, he could get at Oki there as well. And then with the grappling, if it's Jones that's put on his back, I think he can get right back up. I don't think Oki smothers him from a topside grappling perspective. But then again, you flip it the other way. If Jones gets on Oki, I'm not saying Jones is going to spend minutes and minutes on top, but I think he's the better Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist here. I think he's the better grappler. So where it's possible for Oki to win this fight, because he is a good and developing fighter, and we could see a much better version of Oki inside the cage here than what we've seen last time out, I just feel that Mason Jones checks the box in pretty much every area of MMA. It'll be a great scalp for Oki if he was to beat Mason Jones, and The one thing I will say is Jones will always give his opponents an opportunity because of the way he fights. He loves to be in wars, he loves to stand toe-to-toe, and against somebody like Oki who does hit hard, who has got power behind him and a good technical striking game, Jones will give Oki opportunities to win this fight, make no mistake about it. But when it comes to, pre-fight, making a pick and a prediction, it's very difficult for me to sit here and say that I think Oki's going to win the fight, because I do think Jones is technically better in more or less all aspects of mixed martial arts, and it's not a million times better, but I just think it's a slight level above Oki everywhere, which makes him a level above as a fighter, in my opinion. And yeah, look, Oki's going to have opportunities here. I think Mason Jones will give him opportunities, but I can't pick against Jones. For those reasons, I'm picking Mason Jones to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is a fun fight. This is a really interesting fight, and especially from a betting perspective as well. We've got Modestas Bukauskas versus Paul Craig. Now, historically, I've really liked both fighters. I respect absolutely anybody that's a Cage Warriors champion, that's come from Cage Warriors, winning the belt, coming into the UFC. You're always going to be UFC ready. You're always going to be battle tested as well, especially over 5 rounds. And that's exactly what we get with Bukauskas. And this is his second stint in the UFC. Didn't quite work out for him the first time, although I thought he was unfairly cut from the UFC. But went back to Cage Warriors, got his belt back, came back to the UFC, and he's now had 10 fights in the UFC. So he's on that veteran state, that UFC veteran status. But so's Paul Craig, and Paul Craig has been around for much longer. He's a much more unorthodox fighter, trickier to deal with, I'm sure trickier to game plan as well. Like, I can't imagine what it must be like in a fight camp trying to game plan against Paul Craig, emulating him in the gym, trying to figure out what he's going to do. Because Paul Craig's predominantly a grappler, but he's a fighter out of higher levels with James Doolan that's improving a lot, and is improving all aspects of his game, wrestling, striking, to accompany the already very tricky grappling game that he's got. And I don't think Paul Craig is an easy fight for anybody. What I am super confused about here is how Bukauskas is sitting at around minus 350, minus 370. Paul Craig's almost a 3-1 underdog. Like, I don't get that. Like, I really, really don't. I don't see any way on any world that Bukauskas covers his price tag in this fight. Like, to cover it, he's going to have to go in there round 1, put a barrage on Paul Craig and knock him out in the first round. And although possible, because it's possible in any fight, Paul Craig's better than that. And like, you look at Bukauskas' wins in the UFC, like his last win against Ion Cutelaba was a good win, granted, split decision, but it's a win on his record. However, all the other wins that Bukauskas has had in the UFC, I don't think any of those fighters are even with the UFC anymore. Whereas Paul Craig's got wins against current and former UFC champions. So what I'm saying is, I'm not saying Paul Craig should be a favourite here. I think that'd be relatively far-fetched to try and make that argument, considering he's a near 3-1 underdog, and then me telling you he should be a favourite. But if Bukauskas was like minus 130, maybe up to minus 150 as a favourite, with Paul Craig around plus 125, plus 130, I think that's where the betting line should probably be at. Like, Paul Craig's got a very good chance of winning this fight. I think it's a super close and competitive fight, in a fight where, they can lack consistency in some parts, but ultimately they're both very good fighters. They're both well-rounded, and I actually think I don't know why I've got this weird bias for Paul Craig. I feel like I pick him every fight as like a massive underdog, but that's the case. That's what his UFC career's been like. He's been a massive underdog in pretty much every fight, and he pulls through. But he's pulling through and winning as an underdog convincingly in some fights against better fighters than what I believe Modestas Bukauskas is at right now. So, look, it's a super close and competitive fight. Yes, I think that Bukauskas probably is rightfully the favourite, but the line is so wide. And look, this is a betting podcast. Like, it's going to be Craig that I side with. Like, from a striking perspective, yes, Bukauskas is better, but Craig's improving the striking. But again, when I ask myself the question, does Paul Craig get a body lock here and take Bukauskas down, or does he pull guard and start threatening with the the dangerous triangle submissions that he's got? Craig must set them up in a very different way to every other fighter, because he's super successful with them. And again, coming back to the question that I'm asking myself, Yes, I do think Craig gets this fight down to the mat. Yes, I do think Craig can get, the grappling going. Do I think Craig can be competitive on the feet striking? Yes, I do. If it's a 15-minute kickboxing fight, yeah, Bukauskas probably does win, but Craig will be super competitive and make that a very, very close decision if there's, of course, no knockout. So, yeah, I just think it's a super close and competitive fight. I think both fighters will have the moments. I think both fighters will take rounds, and I just don't see why there's only a 3-1 underdog in this fight. So for those reasons, I'm picking Paul Craig to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Ziam versus Caio Fernandes. Now, this has got all the makings to be potentially a real sleeper fight on the card, potential fight of the night type of fight. And I know that Ziam is a relatively sized favourite here. I think he's around minus 300, and I get it, and I kind of agree with it. But Caio Fernandes is a dog, and in the type of fight where he's going to get an opponent that we think is probably going to stand and strike with him, Caio Fernandes is, like I say, he's that dog. He's going to come forwards. He's going to try and put pressure on his opponent and hit them. But I just think Ziam's operating at a slightly higher level from that striking perspective. And also Ziam, for me, is the one that could potentially mix things up a little bit and look for the wrestling and grappling. Like we saw what Mark Diakese did to Caio Fernandes, smothered him for the majority of the fight. And I think that Ziam has potentially got that in his locker as well, where he could get Fernandes down and do some good work on the mat, because for as good as Ziam is striking, his background's in striking as well, he does have a sneaky good and developed wrestling and grappling game where he can look good on top as well. So I think on the feet striking, that's where Ziam's going to give Caio Fernandes probably the best opportunities to try and win the fight. But if Ziam's the one mixing things up, Caio Fernandes will eventually, the striking will not be as efficient because he might be worried about the takedown. But then even within the striking, Ziam is tall, he's long, he's rangy. Technically, I think he's a better striker than Caio Fernandes as well. So I just feel that although this has got every making to be a dogfight, to be a firefight, mad exchanges in the pocket, I think Ziam, if that fight's not that way, I think Ziam's got every opportunity here to strike on the outside when Caio Fernandes closes the distance, get a hold of him, take him down, even if it's just briefly, get back up to the feet, start out striking him again at distance, and then rinse and repeat. Caio Fernandes closes the distance, Ziam deals with it. But even inside that close range, Ziam's got good elbows, power in his elbows as well, good knees. So, yeah, I understand why Ziam's a moderately sized favourite here. And I do think Caio Fernandes is going to have some moments, and I do think it could potentially be a firefight, but I think Ziam has got A, more ways to win, and B, is better where Caio Fernandes has his main strength. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ziam to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got a fun fight here. We've got Patricio Pitbull versus Losene Keita. Losene Keita coming from Octagon. He was the Octagon champion there. Real hyped fighter here in Europe. And he is a very, very good fighter as well. Super aggressive, athletically gifted, fast, hits hard, good defensively from a wrestling and grappling perspective. Can wrestle and grapple himself, although the best aspects of his work does come within the striking. And then you've got Pitbull on the other side that from a stylistic perspective, they're actually not too dissimilar, because Pitbull, you can say the same thing, predominantly a striker, will do his best work within the striking, but can wrestle and grapple. The difference is Pitbull has fought and been operating at a much higher level in mixed martial arts for a much longer period of time. But on the flip side to that, there's age on his side, miles on the clock, whereas Losene Keita is younger, is fresher, I don't even know if he's in his prime yet, but he's definitely more closer to his prime than what Pitbull is. And although Pitbull I still see as a world-class fighter, the issue and the difficulty I see here, because I think that technically speaking, the fight's quite close. And I think from an experience perspective, which you've always got to factor in, Pitbull's got that experience advantage as well. He's seen it all. He's dealt with it all. He's operated at a higher level for many, many years. But what you can't understate here is the speed, the youth, the athleticism from Keita. He's going to be bringing so much youthful energy to that cage. I just don't know how effective Pitbull's going to be, especially, within the striking, because when he's coming into strike with Keita, I think Keita's just going to be quicker, faster, more aggressive, more physically imposing as well, a bit more overwhelming. And I think Pitbull might end up looking for the wrestling and the grappling here to try and take Keita down. But Keita's difficult to take down. Strong hips, good sprawl. And yeah, look, it's one of them fights, and I say this a lot. If I don't watch the event and I wake up the next day and I go onto Tapology and I see that Pitbull's got a win next to his name, am I going to be overly shocked? No. I'd be lying if I said I would be shocked. But I just think Keita's got it here. He's got it. He's got the confidence, the hype, the speed, the movement, the skill set, the ability. I think he matches up against Pitbull really well from a stylistic perspective. And I just think again, if it goes 3 rounds, I think Keita will have just done the better work, more volume, avoided any shots from Pitbull, defended any takedowns. And if there is a finish, I do see Keita putting Pitbull out if there's a finish. So yeah, I think it's a tough one for Pitbull, because Keita is this much younger, fresher, hungrier, fitter, more athletic in his prime fighter, and I think that's where the difficulty is going to lie. So for those reasons, I'm picking Losene Keita to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another newcomer here and another champion from a European promotion. We've got William Gomis versus Robert Ruchala. And Ruchala, I think, is how you pronounce the name. Very, very difficult for me to keep this going throughout this fight, but I'll try my best. But Ruchala, KSW champion. Again, like we've just mentioned with Keita before, he was an Octagon champion, legitimate promotion in Europe. KSW's been around for much longer, definitely a legitimate promotion in Europe. If you're a champion in KSW, you know you've got something about you. And Ruchala is a good fighter and an entertaining fighter to watch as well. Will come forwards, be super aggressive, will look to hit you with hard punches, but then he's got this wicked ground and pound game as well, where he will land solid shots, get a good position before starting the ground and pound. So he won't go strike over position. He gets his position first, and then he gets to work afterwards. Now, from a striking perspective, I do think Ruchala's got an issue here against Gomis, because Ruchala doesn't really seem to set his shots up too well. He's just super aggressive, come forwards and will look to try and take your head off, which is always going to be a fan favourite type of fighter. But William Gomis is very much, aware of danger coming at him. He's very technical. He sees things, and I just feel from that technical striking perspective, when Ruchala's coming forwards trying to be aggressive, he's going to leave openings and gaps for Gomis to get at him striking. Even if Gomis is on the back foot, William Gomis actually does some of his better work on the back foot. He's, a bit like, I'm not saying he's the karate of Lyoto Machida, but Machida did a lot of his good work off the back foot as well, and Gomis is the same. So Gomis doesn't necessarily have to be the one coming forwards, which is good for him in these types of fights against very aggressive, pressure-heavy fighters like Ruchala. The issue where I'm seeing for Gomis is if Ruchala can get this fight down to the mat, which fighters have been able to do that against Gomis, he might get off on some good ground and pound and really start to force or put pressure on the referee to take action. So again, does Ruchala get this fight down to the mat and often? And I just don't know. It's going to be interesting to see this fight. We're going to know more about Ruchala as, I know it's a little bit of a cliche to say, but we're going to know more about him, significantly more about him after this fight than we do before it. And from what I know of Gomis right now, he's dealt and beaten fighters that have got a better wrestling and grappling game at a higher level in the UFC than what Robert Ruchala has. Now, that's not saying Ruchala can't win this fight, because he definitely can for the reasons I've just explained, but I trust in a fight where I know I'm gonna know significantly more about the UFC debutant after the fight than what I do pre-fight. I'm more often than not going to side with the fighter that is UFC proven, that has been fighting at a higher level and has dealt and beaten with fighters with this style before as well. So for those reasons, and those reasons alone, I'm picking William Gomis to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Oumar C versus Brendson Ribeiro. Now, I think this is a real tough fight for Ribeiro. Ribeiro's actually proved me wrong on a couple of occasions as well. I wasn't too high on him in regards to the skill set. Kind of didn't know how long he was going to be around the UFC. But he's proven to, he's got wins in the UFC, so he's proven his worth. But I think Oumar C is just going to be very, very tough for Ribeiro. I think Ribeiro's got to keep this fight standing. I think he's going to have a difficult job trying to take C down anyway, even if he did want to wrestle him. But C's game is that grinding, gritty, ugly, dirty type of style where he's going to pressure you, pin you against the cage, look to take you down. If you get back up, that's fine. He's going to keep a hold of you. He's going to use his physicality to put you back against the cage wall and then continuously try to take you down until he sort of broke you against that cage wall, and now he's spending more and more time on top and getting the top control time in, landing ground and pound, looking for submissions. And I think C, first of all, at home in France is going to be, very beneficial to him, because even though he's got the style that's not super entertaining from a fan perspective, the French fans will love it because it's their guy, and, they'll get behind him rather than booing him. And again, that'll take some pressure off the referee as well, I think, in regards to separating. But I think Ribeiro is just not going to be able to deal with C's pressure and overwhelming pressure and the defensive wrestling and grappling for the majority of the fight. He'll have moments where he defends takedowns, sure. He'll have moments where he gets back up, I'm sure. But for the duration of the fight, I just think C's going to be dominant here and have his way, and I don't think Ribeiro's going to have too many answers for it. I think Ribeiro's best chance of winning this fight is to catch C on the back foot, catching C as C's coming forward to close the distance, and maybe maybe rocking him or dropping him or knocking him out with a quick 1-2 or a quick one shot on the back foot. But I think it's a low percentage probability. So for those reasons, I'm picking Oumar C to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got another newcomer and we've got another former champion in a different promotion as well. We've got a few of these on this card. We've got, Keita from Octagon, Ruchala from KSW, the fight I'm about to talk about, and another one later in the card as well. So, yeah, we've got Marcin Tybura versus Ante Delija. Now, Delija, I think, was supposed to fight on the UFC a while back, and I'm not quite sure what happened, but it's Delija that's the former champion elsewhere. He won the PFL Global Tournament in 2022, so like 3 years ago, which is, a super impressive feat. Being a PFL champion is something that absolutely holds weight, at least in my opinion. And Delia's probably on the little bit of older side as well, but with them being, the big boys, that age is probably closer to prime than it is decline. So Delia's actually fighting probably within his prime right now. What I like about Delija is he's very fast, he's very aggressive, he's got power in his hands as well. Even if the fight isn't quite going his way, he doesn't give up on himself, he'll keep swinging, and eventually something happens and something cracks. Now, the issue here with this fight and with the prediction is I've seen Delija be susceptible to having the distance closed, to have his back against the cage, to be grinded a little bit, wrestling takedowns against him, getting back up, and the fight just being very gritty and grindy and him succumbing to that. And Tybura's got that style in his back pocket. Like, Tybura can, be super effective as well with his striking, wrestling, good ground and pound, good submissions. But if Tybura wants to be a little bit sweaty, a little bit gritty, a little bit greasy, he's got that in his back pocket. And he's a UFC veteran. He's been around the UFC for years, fought the best of the best that's got to offer. So I could absolutely see a world in where Tybura, sort of withstands initially the hard shots from Delija to close the distance, gets a hold of him, puts his back against the cage and just makes it ugly but effective, right? But I could also see a world where Delia's fast and he hits hard, and Tybura's been knocked out numerous times, and when Tybura's not the better striker, he can be got at there as well. And I can see a world where Delija hits Tybura with something either from the outside, or if Tybura's coming forwards, just enough for it to stun Tybura, put him on the back foot. And then if Tybura's moving backwards a little bit stunned or a little bit hurt, I think it's pretty much game over with how Delija fights, because he pours the combinations on and he'll just overwhelm with pressure and power with those punches, and then the back goes against the cage, and then the fighter either turtles up or they drop down to a sit to like a sitting position, and then the referee stops the fight. So it's a real tough fight to predict, because I can see both. I think there's a high percentage probability of both of those paths to victory playing out. It's just which one does play out, because only one can play out. again, it just makes it difficult to pick. So again, when these types of fights come into play and I can see that legitimate path to victory and I'm a little bit unsure which way it's going to go, I normally do revert back to the betting line. And interestingly, I think it was Tybura that was the slight favourite, but the money's coming on Delija, and now the line's flipped a little bit, and now Tybura's the slight underdog. And then when you think that, okay, well, look, in a close fight, I'll more often than not just side with the underdog because, that's probably where more of the value is, and it's a betting podcast. But then when you add in the experience edge that Tybura's got here as well, because he's been in the UFC for years and fought and beaten probably better fighters than Delija, it kind of makes sense for the pick to be Tybura. But make no mistake about it, like, Delia's got every chance of absolutely flattening Tybura in this fight as well. But from a pre-fight pick and prediction, I'm going to side with the experience, and that experience is the one that's got that slight underdog money on him as well. So for those reasons, I'm picking Marcin Tybura to win this fight. And in the next fight, guess what? Another UFC newcomer and another former champion elsewhere in Europe. We've got Axel Sola versus Rhys McKee. And this is a really good fight. I love Axel Sola's addition to the UFC roster. He was the champion in Aries. So again, a legitimate promotion, a legitimate belt. He's here for a reason. But also he spent a lot of his amateur time on the IMAF scene as well, which is something that I respect a lot. And that the IMAF route gives you a route and amateur experience, setting yourself up for pro, that I don't believe any other path gives you. So anybody that's got a ton of IMAF experience before they turn pro and before they come into the UFC, you know that they've took the hard road throughout their entire career and set themselves up. And it's no surprise that we see guys like Axel Sola, like Mohamed Mokaev. I know he's not in the UFC anymore, but from a skill set perspective, he should be. And it's no surprise to see these fighters that have had heavy IMAF careers have such a successful professional career as well, because they've had that good pathway from a very early stage in the career. Now, back to the fight itself. Rhys McKee is a fighter that he's fully got that dog in him. He's got his first UFC win now. He's had a couple of stints in the UFC. It was a long time coming, that win. And he's a fighter that I do like. He's tall, he's long, he puts pressure on his opponents. Good striker, good wrestler, good grappler. Tricky to kind of deal with, but he can be got at the same time, but loves to be in a war, will take a shot to eat a shot. He's definitely a fan favourite type of fighter. Whereas Axel Sola, I think, is a little bit different. He's not a fighter that'll expend, unnecessary energy. He's not a fighter that'll throw for the sake of throwing. So that does mean that his volume can be quite low. But he's one of these fighters that's just so well-rounded everywhere. Like, he's a solid, well-rounded striker. He's a solid wrestler. He's a solid grappler. He's not he's not overly a specialist in any one of those areas. But you don't really need to be at this level in the UFC as long as you've got a world-class skill set in all the disciplines. You don't need to be that next level striker, that next level wrestler or grappler. Not until you really start making your way through to the top of the UFC. But even if you never become that specialist, as long as you're just improving on that world-class, each discipline skill set, then you're going to be up there with the UFC anyway. So when it comes to Rhys McKee beating Axel Sola, I'm thinking, well, where does he get at him? Because if Rhys McKee starts being overwhelming from a striking perspective, I think Sola can get the fight down to the mat and do good work on top of McKee. And I think McKee may get stuck on his back against Sola. But if McKee comes out trying to take this fight to the mat, which I don't think he's going to, Axel Sola, again, from a defensive perspective, he can keep the fight standing. And if he's having the better exchanges on the feet, then Sola's going to be in control of the fight from that striking perspective and keeping the fight upright. So I do think that Rhys McKee's got it. I don't think it's I don't think it's not a winnable fight for McKee. Like, I definitely think he can win, and he's got the UFC experience at the end of the day, whereas Axel Sola's making his UFC debut, so there's going to be some debut jitters. But I just think skill set wise, Axel Sola's the slightly better fighter, and that's kind of where I have to lean here. Like, again, I know I say it all the time, I've said it already on this podcast. If I don't watch this card and I go to sleep and I wake up the next day and I look on Topology and Rhys McKee's got a win next to his name, well, no, I'm not going to be shocked at all. But I trust Axel Sola's all-rounded discipline a little bit more, and I think he's got more ways to win because of that. So for those reasons, I'm picking Axel Sola to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Sam Patterson versus Trey Waters. Now, this is interesting because both of these fighters are absolutely huge for the division in regards to height and length. It's one of these fights where both fighters normally fight an opponent much shorter than them, but yeah, they've got each other. They're both tall, they're both long, they both like to fight on the outside, and I love it when these matches get made because, again, Patterson and Waters won't have had too many fights in their career where they've fought somebody their own height, and certainly not anybody that's taller. They're used to fighting somebody that's much shorter. So yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see how that plays out from that perspective. And when you actually look at the numbers as well, like you've got Sam Patterson that's 6'3" with a 78-inch reach, and then you've got Trey Waters that's 6'5" with a 77-inch reach. So Patterson's slightly shorter with a longer reach, Waters is slightly taller with a shorter reach. The welterweights, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. So, yeah, interesting fight. I think Waters gets away a lot with the wins that he's had in the UFC, or even when he's not winning and he's having good moments in his UFC fights. I think he gets away with it a lot because of that height difference, to the point where, it's just difficult for the opponent to get inside. He's 6'5" at welterweight. It's, with a massive reach, it's going to be very difficult to get inside. And he gets away with looking good because of that more often than not, in my opinion. Whereas on the flip side here, I actually think when Patterson gets got at and where he struggles is when he's fighting that short fighter that gets inside. I think Patterson would much prefer to fight a much taller fighter than the fighters that he does fight, and somebody like Trey Waters I think is perfect for him. So again, just my analysis, but I think that Patterson kind of will prefer to fight somebody of Trey Waters' size, whereas Trey Waters normally flourishes more against fighters that are smaller, which again is starting to lean me towards Patterson. But then I also think Patterson is super underrated. I think that he's got a really, really good skill set, very good technical striker. I think he can also get fights down to the mat and look good on the mat as well. He's also got some power on the feet. And then, like I say, I think he's going to enjoy the fact that he's got a fighter his own height and he's not having to deal with some shorter wrecking ball coming inside, throwing big overhand rights and giving him sort of flashbacks of getting badly knocked out early in his UFC career. So yeah, I think from a personal perspective, this fight suits Patterson better from that physical side of things and the height and the reach and the range. But then I also think Patterson's the better fighter as well from a skill set and technical perspective. So for those reasons, I'm picking Sam Patterson to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Brad Tavares versus Robert Bryczek. Now, Bryczek was a fighter I was super excited to see in the UFC when he made his debut. He was an absolute wrecking ball in octagon, coming forwards, knocking everybody out, looked physically huge and imposing, and then he came in on his UFC debut. I thought he had a real good fight ahead of him against Iho Potieria. Bryczek, I think, was a massive favourite as well because everybody was seeing the same thing I was seeing, and the performance was just so flat. It was like we're looking at a completely different fighter in the UFC octagon to watch what we were seeing in the cage at octagon outside of the UFC. And you can maybe put that down to UFC jitters, you can maybe put that down to an off night, maybe a combination of both. Maybe there was other mitigating circumstances that I'm definitely not going to go into, but something wasn't the same with Bryczek against Potieria. And honestly, my gut feeling is that it was a combination of the things that I wasn't talking about and that I won't talk about, but also a combination of an off night and a combination of a UFC debut that made that performance super flat. But we're not going to know, that's not going to be confirmed to me if I'm correct there until after I see this fight. And unfortunately, I can't pick or predict Robert Bryczek to win a fight against someone like Brad Tavares when I've just seen him lose against Iho Potieria, no matter what my gut's telling me about that one individual fight. And every athlete has his off day, game, match, fight, whatever the sport it is. I just pre-fight, I can't sit here and say, yeah, I think Bryczek's going to win. Well, why do you think he's going to win? Well, yeah, he came off that loss against Iho Potieria. It just doesn't work like that. Like Brad Tavares much more experienced. From a skill set perspective, I think he's much more technical as well. The issue is with Brad Tavares is he's got miles on the clock. He's an aging fighter. He's been in and around the UFC and the top of the UFC for years and years. So, like I say, he's got that miles on the clock there. And what comes with that is, when there's overwhelming power coming at you, it can crumble you a little bit. Brecek, technically speaking, should be that overwhelming power, but again, based on his last fight, what are we actually going to get? And that's where you get stuck with Brecek here. If Brecek came in there against Potiera, looked like how he looked in Octagon, knocked Potiera out, super impressive fashion, then maybe this pick's a bit different. But I can't pick Brecek, who's just lost to Potiera, to beat a Brad Tavares, who's who's been a stud in the UFC for many years at the top of the division. I just can't do it. So yeah, and again, if Brecek does come in super aggressive and Tavares, weathers a storm and then starts to pick Brecek apart, then he's going to chew him up and pick him apart at a much higher level and a much higher rate than what Potiera did. So yeah, and again, I know I keep digressing before I come to my final pick, which what it's going to be at this point, but like, Tavares is a level above Potiera as a fighter as well. So Brecek lost a fight and has now got a massive step up in competition. It's a tough one for Brecek, or at least a tough one for me to pick Brecek. I could absolutely see Brecek coming here and knocking Tavares out and my gut proving to be correct. But again, you can't make a pick and prediction on your gut. It's got to be what you've seen with your eyes, what you're researching in tape and your analysis from that. And for those reasons, I'm picking Brad Tavares to win this fight. And in the next fight, this fight's sick, we've got Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Andreas Gustafsson. Andreas Gustafsson, I tried betting on this guy in the UFC like 3 times before he eventually made his UFC debut. And then when he did make his UFC debut, he made it against probably the tougher fight of the ones that were scheduled. And he was a bigger underdog. I think he was like minus 200 or something. And I got him at a better line and he absolutely dominated his UFC debut. This guy is a fan favourite. If you don't like Andreas Gustafsson, then you need to go and watch badminton, or get into swimming, or chess, whatever it is, dominoes. Andreas Gustafsson, people will say, oh yeah, well all he does is look to pin his opponents against the cage, but dude is absolutely insane. He'll eat bombs on his chin to be able to close that distance. He'll bomb back on you. He's dangerous. He cuts his opponents up. He gets cut up himself. He'll eat 3 punches if it means him just landing one of his own punches. He's got knockouts. He's aggressive, powerful, and yes, that grindy style to his game is what people aren't going to like, but guess what? This is mixed martial arts. Andreas Gustafsson is an absolute savage. He's physically imposing. He looks insanely strong, and I think he's going to be super difficult to beat unless you've got the right style to beat him. Now, Rinat Fakhretdinov is a fighter that, yes, he does have power in his hands, but he's definitely preferring to wrestle, get his opponents down on the mat. And when it's coming body to body with Andreas Gustafsson and the wrestling's happening, takedowns are happening, and then maybe there's a stalled takedown attempt and it's becoming a battle of physicality, I don't see Gustafsson losing over 3 rounds. I can see Fakhretdinov being very good early, but we've seen Fakhretdinov tire when he's met with a brick wall or where he's met with super resistance. And Andreas Gustafsson is that brick wall and he is that super resistance. So I can see Fakhretdinov having good early moments in this fight, getting Andreas Gustafsson down maybe, but man, he's going to have to work for absolutely everything that he tries to take from Gustafsson, and what that's going to do is deplete Fakhretdinov's cardio, as Gustafsson seems to have that level of grindy cardio all day long. So I think it's a fight that, again, I'm going to say it once again, and it's becoming quite a frequent thing. If I don't watch this card, I wake up the next day and I see a win next to Fakhretdinov's name. No, I'm not going to be shocked. It's a close and competitive fight, but I just think with what I've seen in previous fights, especially from a gas tank related perspective, I think Fakhretdinov's going to have success early because he is a very good wrestler and a very good grappler. But I think those the good wrestling and grappling moments are going to come at a cost for Fakhretdinov. The cost is going to be gas tank, and then eventually I think he starts to slow down. And as he starts to slow down, I think Gustafsson can get on top of Fakhretdinov and completely empty that gas tank the longer the fight goes on. So yeah, I think Fakhretdinov's going to look okay and look good early, do some good work early, but I think Gustafsson takes over and wins the fight. So for those those reasons, I'm picking Andreas Gustafsson to win this fight. And the final fight on the card, the final fight to break down, we've got Shauna Bannon versus Sam Hughes. Now, what I will say straight away is I think the line is too wide. I think it should be a little bit shorter, but Sam Hughes, my opinion, should be the rightful favourite here. And like I say, she's a moderately sized favourite. I just think the line should be a little bit shorter. But with that being said, I do think it's a tough fight for Shauna Bannon. Bannon is a fighter that likes a lot of space, a lot of time, to be able to showcase and flourish a skill set. She's a technical striker that does like fighting out at range. But Sam Hughes absolutely thrives in these types of fights where their opponents are desperate for space and time and distance to set strikes up and look to pile on volume from a technical perspective. Because Hughes is a dog, she closes the distance, she won't give you that time and space and the distance, she'll get a hold of you, she'll either, look to land hard combinations in super short boxing range, and then she'll level change into takedowns, get you taken down. And this is the thing with Bannon. I think when Bannon's fighting inside boxing range against somebody like Sam Hughes, who is that dog, who is that super aggressive puncher, I think Bannon's going to have some real difficulties. And then while she's trying to deal with that boxing range, if Sam Hughes level changes, I think she can get Bannon down. And yeah, Bannon can be a little bit tricky on the mat as well, but I don't see Sam Hughes getting caught with a triangle or armbar off, by Bannon off her back. I think Sam Hughes is going to be more of the blanket type of grappler on top, heavy pressure, again, reduces any space, gaps, holes, openings for Bannon to try and get back up to her feet. And ultimately, I do think it's going to be a difficult fight for Bannon. I think Sam Hughes, in a 15-minute kickboxing fight, I think Sam Hughes will be able to close the distance routinely, land good hands and beat Bannon from a striking perspective. And then if we're looking at the wrestling grappling, I think Sam Hughes can get takedowns and blanket Bannon on bottom, staying relatively safe from any submissions from Bannon off her back. That's a couple of paths to victory there that are solid in my opinion. So for those reasons, I'm picking Sam Hughes to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you to everybody tuning in. Thank you for everybody listening. If you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, then please come over to YouTube as well. Because on YouTube, not only can you subscribe to the YouTube channel, which really helps the algorithms, really helps us as a channel, but you can also leave a comment on the video as well. So if we disagree on any picks, if we agree on anything, if you're super confident in something that I've just backed that up with, then let me know. Tell me what your favourite underdog is of the card. Tell me what your favourite bet is. Tell me what your favourite parlay is. Whatever that is, drop a comment. Let's get talking. It is myself that does get back to every single comment, and I do try and get back to every comment. Every week's a busy week with other ventures and businesses that I've got within the sport. So yeah, I always give my best to try and get back to anybody that's going out the way to comment and to have a conversation. So yeah, that's youtube.com/MMA Play 365. And finally, one last time, if you do want to jump into the action this weekend from a betting perspective, make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com. Something I did mention in the introduction is we don't separate the Bayes AI predictions from the handicapper predictions, so you get absolutely everything in every subscription package, and it's all super affordable. I mentioned that at the start as well. It's just $5 for one event, $10 a month, or it's $99 for an entire 12 months of predictions and betting advice. So like we said, super affordable, so you can make your money back as fast as you possibly can, so you can start profiting on top of your bets. If we're pricing a year at like $300, $500, it's going to be much more difficult for you to make your money back before you start profiting on top of your bets. So that's why we make everything super affordable, and that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.